I don't know if you need to know these two terms, but standing water is, so like in a lake that's not moving around, is called lentic, and flowing water is lotic. This is in the book, but I'm not sure those terms are important for the exam. So write them down if you want. We got a ton of things to remember, so if you skip over that, that's not going to probably kill you on the exam. All right, so in a lake system, we have different life zones, just like we have in the coastal system. So here, we don't have to, I'm not going to outline like I did in the last one because these zones are pretty simple. So go ahead and sketch yourself a diagram, or maybe just define these, but I like diagrams because pictures help me learn. So I would draw a little sketch diagram of a lake, even if you just draw like a circle pond or something. And you're going to mark out, the first thing you do is the littoral zone. The littoral, I like to remember this by saying littoral is the shoral zone. I make it rhyme. It's not a real word, but I like to pretend. So littoral zone will be all this shallow water that's completely sunlit, that's right around the edge of the lake. So here would be the littoral zone as well. The limnetic zone is all of that area that's off the bottom of the lake that is sunlit. This is an area where photosynthesis can take place. We can have algae growing, cyanobacteria. We have all of these seagrasses and stuff that grow here on the edge. All of that can grow in the limnetic zone. Now, for some lakes, they're not deep enough not to have a limnetic zone. So light reaches all the way to the bottom of the lake. In deep lakes, we'll actually have this area called the profundal zone. So this area, the profundal zone, is where there's not enough sunlight for photosynthesis to take place. So that would be like the twilight zone or the baffle zone in the oceans. So profundo. And then the bottom zone, which starts with a B, so B for bottom, is the benthic zone. Remember those organisms that lived on the bottom of bottom of lakes and marine ecosystems are called benthic organisms. The ones that are either attached to or crawl on or grow on the bottom of the ocean or bottom of a lake, that's the benthic zone. In the ocean, this was called the abyssal zone. So the zones of a lake, again, not all lakes have a profundal zone because they're not deep enough. But some lakes, especially like the Great Lakes, they are definitely deep enough to have a profundal zone where sunlight does not reach to those depths. This is just showing the water cycle. We're going to skip that because we already covered the water cycle in like chapter 3 or something like that. Now, wetlands are extraordinarily important. We have different kinds of wetlands. Some wetlands have trees. So this one here. A swamp, which is a type of wetland. Again, wetlands are designated as lands that are wet sometime, at least sometime throughout the year. So yes, the land is wet. It's a wetland. But these ones with trees, those would be considered swamps. So trees are swamps. We can have a fen or a bog. This one is probably best, these two are probably best representative of a bog. A fen tends to have grasses like this with a little bit of water going through. But I don't think you need to know the differences between fen, bog, and swamps. Basically a fen and a bog, the difference between those is the water moves faster in one or the other, and they both have different vegetation based on that movement of water, based on the oxygen levels. A swamp is literally designated by slow-moving water that have trees that actually grow out of the water. But wetlands have enormous ecosystem and economic services that are provided by them. We talked about these already, so if you wrote them down already, yay for you, but if not, here is another way to write it down. So wetlands, they filter and degrade toxic wastes and pollutants, so they basically clean the water. They reduce flooding and erosion, because they're a place where excess water can go. They sustain stream flows, so when the river gets a little bit lower, the water from a wetland seeps back in. Now, recharge, I did forget to say this last time. I should have remembered it. It's very important. So because that water slows down, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when it rains really hard, the water just kind of runs off the surface of the land. And when it does that, not much actually soaks into the ground surface. But when we call recharge of groundwater, that means we're putting water back into the aquifer. So a recharge of groundwater would be the water going back down into it. When we have these wetlands, when the water's just sitting there very slowly, it can seep in through the ground, it can infiltrate, remember that word, and then it can percolate, remember that word, all the way down in through the regolith in the aquifer, and then even down if the aquifer is a permeable rock, we can have the water seep in through the pore spaces of the aquifer rock itself. And so that helps recharge groundwater. Also helps maintain biodiversity. And a lot of people use these things for recreation. The Everglades is an example of a very large wetland area down in Florida. All right, human activities that affect freshwater ecosystems are dams and canals, farm runoff, those add excess plant nutrients. Specifically, we're talking about phosphates, nitrates, and nitrites. Drainage of wetlands for expansion of agriculture. We love to drain the swamp. We love to drain that useless wetland that has no purpose and pave over a parking lot and put it in a supermarket. Or, hey, this would be great lands to be able to plant stuff in my field, and then I'm going to complain when it floods and all of my crops are ruined. Well, duh, it's a wetland. So we love to drain those areas, but it's really better to leave them intact. Not only that, but they're a great refuge for migrating bird species. Some migrating bird species only will nest in wetland areas. And when we drain those wetland areas up along places, especially like up along the Wasatch Front here, where there's a lot of construction going on, migratory bird species come through and they have less and less places to be able to rear their young. So what can be done to help marine aquas? I don't know why this is in here. This is like way out of order. Anyway, one things you should write down about fishing, probably because I left it out and I put it in last year to try to remember ourselves. One thing they can do with fishing nets is put something in that's called a TED, a TED, and TED stands for Turtle Extruder Device. So extruder as in like get the turtle out device. So basically what it is it's like cage here, and it has a flap which allows some fish to escape in their net. But for the most part, as this net's being pulled through the water, the fish will just go straight through the grate. But anything bigger than a fish, so a turtle or a dolphin, will end up getting stuck on this little ramp thing. Because this net's moving through the water, it'll cause it to slide up, and then it will push it out of this hatch, and the turtle just comes right out. Here's one in use. The turtle, so the TED, the Turtle Extruding Device. The turtle comes out here, the thing's moving, and then the turtle just kind of like comes out of the net pretty unscathed. Now, this reduces turtle capture and bycatch by a large portion. So it's a really cool thing. All right, so we have a bunch of international treaties and laws that we have to write down. Aren't you tired? I'm tired just from talking, honestly. CITES. We saw CITES in the video we watched, actually. In that horrible video that made all of you guys feel terrible that you're human beings on this planet. When they were going and trying to get the manta ray on the listed for the endangered, well, it was already on the endangered list, but they were trying to get it put restrictions on its international trade. They were at CITES. So CITES stands for the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. So I'll say that again. It's the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. So many member nations are part of this. You guys saw different nations giving votes on whether or not the manta ray species should be listed on there. Restrictions on their trade, on the sale between international borders. Now, that's what this is. Specific restrictions on trade moving from one country to another. I don't know if you guys noticed, but China was not okay with allowing the manta ray species to put on the list for restrictions, mainly because, if you remember, they are the highest trader in manta ray gills for, their special properties that they don't actually do. But whatever, that's just me being angry at the world. So right there, a bunch of countries to come together to restrict international trade of endangered species. Now the next one, Global Treaty on Migratory Species. I like this one because its name is pretty much what it is. So this is multiple nations coming together to work on helping the species, especially endangered species, of migratory bird species from one nation to the next. So putting in laws, regulation, rules in removing habitat or helping their habitats being conserved for specific species that are moving through different countries. An example of that would be the Canadian geese. They are moving from Mexico up through the United States and then up through Canada when they hit that summer season. And then when it starts to cool down, they start to come back through here. They specifically come through Utah, and they hit Layton. I know many of you seen them in November wandering around in Layton Commons Park. There's like many of them with their poop included all over in the park before they move their way on south to warmer grounds. All right, next one is U.S. Marine Mammal Protection Act. This one is just in United States waters. Now, every nation has specific distance away from their borders, waters in which they control. An island nation, same thing. That distance is 12 nautical miles. So this specific act here, it demands that marine mammals are protected within U.S. waters only. All right, so when I'm talking about mammals, I'm talking about aquatic mammals. All marine mammals, such as whales, dolphins, they're all whales. But porpoises would count too. Seals, sea lions, manatees, dugongs, sea otters, polar bears. I guess there are a lot of polar bears. I was going to say, what polar bears are in U.S. waters? And then I realized Alaska happens to be a state of the United States. So, yeah, good on me there for that one. All right, so our next one is the SE Endangered Species Act. And the important stuff we need to know about that one is just that the Endangered Species Act just basically provides a program for the conservation of threatened and endangered plants and animals and the habitats in which they are found. So the Endangered Species Act provides conservation of these organisms that are threatened or endangered and also the habitats which they are found. So that's the important part there, that if we list an animal as endangered, their habitat could also get restoration because they need to be able to survive in that habitat. So this act helps give money and support for that. Now that act, a lot of these acts, they are specifically laws. So if you see it end in act, it's going to be most likely talking about just the United States. Things that say treaty or international convention or something like that, that's going to suggest something worldwide treaty or worldwide regulation. But if you see the word act, assume that that's going to be just within the United States because that's a specific law that we're learning about for our country. All right, so the next one, the Whale Conservation and Protection Act, right here. So the Whale Conservation and Protection Act. That one is a little bit weirder. You might want to take notes on that one because it's not as intuitive as the other ones. Basically, it requires that specifically the Secretary of Commerce with Marine Mammal Commission and the coastal states of the United States. So I'll say that again. The Secretary of Commerce with Marine Mammal Commission and the coastal states, they are required to do comprehensive studies on all whales found in U.S. waters jurisdiction. So any whales that come into our territory, we have to basically, oh, sorry, I didn't know this thing was in my way. We have to basically have detailed data on those so we know information about it, because you can't protect something that you don't know anything about. Okay, our last one, which is the International Convention on Biological Diversity. So this one is, again, international, so this is between multiple nations, also known as the CBD. Hopefully we don't need to know that acronym because there's a lot of acronyms that we need to know for this class. It's an international treaty. Their main goals are conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use of that biodiversity, and the weird thing about this one is fair, equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the use of genetic resources. Alright, so this is signed by nearly every nation in the world, like 193 nations or something like that. And when we say that it's like benefits should, the ecosystem should benefit, or everyone should equally share in the benefits. Here we're saying that ecosystems, species, and genetic resources should be used for the benefit of humans specifically, with the caveat that it's in a way that does not lead to the decline of the biodiversity in the area. So I guess that's what it kind of means. Like, everybody should be able to benefit. It's not saying that people shouldn't be able to use natural environment, but that we should be using it in a way that doesn't degrade that natural environment. Okay, that is everything. I don't know, it's probably like an hour and a half of notes. Sorry, that's horrible, and it'd probably take you 2 hours to do it because you probably had to pause because I talked too fast. But that is everything we need to know for this exam. The practice test is up on Canvas. It's been up for a few days. So once you get all this stuff jotted down and you start studying, start taking those practice tests. It's a huge test bank because it's a lot of information that we've covered. So if you just take it once and you're like, oh, I did great, and you got like 90-something%, take it again, because just maybe, you haven't seen all the questions, and you might get questions on topics that you all knew or something, and so we got a very unlucky sampling of the test bank. So make sure you take it a couple times to really see if you're ready for the test. But again, study first. Make sure we're learning for the long run. We're not going to cram the night before, because when we learn for the long run, we do better on end of level tests, like, for example, the AP exam. All right, good luck.